I'm not making Deno for a small subset of enthusiasts. This is software meant to be used by millions of developers, just like Node. And so we're trying to push JavaScript forward. We're trying to introduce TypeScript. We're trying to get people to use ECMAScript modules. We're trying to get people to use async await instead of callbacks. There's all these pressures that we're introducing to kind of push people forward. But at the end of the day, this is software for people and needs to solve their problems.
This episode is brought to you by Sentry. Build better software faster, diagnose, fix, and optimize the performance of your code. More than 1 million developers and 68,000 organizations already use Sentry, and that includes us. Here's the easiest way to try Sentry. Head to sentry.io/demo/sandbox. That is a fully functional version of Sentry that you can poke at. And best of all, our listeners get the team plan for free for 3 months. Head to sentry.io and use the code PARTYTIME when you sign up. Again, sentry.io and use the code PARTYTIME.
This is JS Party, your weekly celebration of JavaScript and the web. You are listening to our final episode of 2022, but don't worry, we'll be back in the first week of January with our 4th annual New Year's episode. Thanks to our partners at Fastly for shipping all of our pods super fast to wherever you listen. Check them out at fastly.com. And to our friends at Fly, deploy your app servers close to your users, no ops required. Learn more at fly.io. Okay, hey, it's party time, y'all. Oh yes, you know what time it is. It is JS Party Time. I am your internet friend, Jerod, and I'm here with no panelists. It's just me. I can't intro Amel or Nick or K-Ball or Amelia or anybody else, but you know what? I'm okay with that because I have a very special guest today, and that means I get him all to myself. Yes, I am joined by Ryan Dahl. What's up, man?
Hello. Not much. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. Happy to have you here. I think this is the second time we've gotten to chat over the years. A year or so back, you were on the changelog with myself and Adam, and today you're on JS Party. So that's very cool. We're here to talk about Deno. So big news from Deno Land as of version 1.28, which launched, I think, mid-November. You added 1.3 million new packages. Here's how I think this went down. I think you went out to NPM, you scraped the list of package names and descriptions, and then you got a huge instance on EC2 or something, and you plugged GitHub Copilot into it, and you just fed GitHub Copilot the package names and said, port this to Deno, port this to Deno, port this to Deno. Is that the process of getting this stuff out there?
Yeah, pretty close. No, basically we did a bunch of compatibility work. So, Deno is really founded under the idea of moving JavaScript forward. And NPM has been around for many years now and contains all sorts of legacy stuff in it. And in particular, has a lot of common JS stuff. Mm-hmm. And it's been many years now since we moved to ECMAScript modules. And Deno is ECMAScript module first and, really pushing its users not to use require. In fact, forbidding its users to use require. But if you link to any package in NPM, somewhere in the dependency tree is going to be some require statements and some require FS, some like built-in Node module stuff. Mm-hmm. And what we did is we essentially implemented that in Deno, but we did it in a way where you can't just use that as in your normal Deno scripts. You can reach through this portal into NPM and kind of enable this, kind of transparently enable this compatibility mode that allows you to import. Essentially, it's hard to support everything for various reasons, for kind of bug reasons, for security reasons, but kind of 80 to 90% of modules work pretty well, work out of the box. So the compatibility layer is it's been under construction for about a year now and is now stable in Deno. And you can essentially just import NPM packages, and it should more or less work out of the box. You should even, if that package is kind of a more modern package that like gives TypeScript types and stuff, you should even get TypeScript support out of the box in your editor with kind of tab completion and stuff.
Very cool. So been in the works for about a year, a big effort, no doubt. I wonder about the psychology of making this decision. It was obviously very pragmatic, a big blocker for adoption. We've been talking about Deno, I think ever since you announced it. And I've been asking people who come on the pod, are you using Deno? Have you tried it? And a lot of the people are like, well, I just can't use this. I can't use that. I already have an app that has these packages. When I start something brand new, I'll give Deno a look. But for now, no, I haven't tried it. Have you? And then the answer is like, it's kind of the similar. Like some people hopped in, but a lot of people haven't. So this is obviously a big opportunity to expose Deno to a bunch of people who otherwise couldn't even give it a shot. That being said, with Deno being like your big restart, right? Your opportunity to rearrange the letters and have a clean break from Node and some of the mistakes that you made with Node. Did you have like a push and pull in your heart as like Ryan, the CEO of Deno versus Ryan, the lead dev of the Deno project? Like we're kind of going back and bringing some of the legacy with us, whereas you had this fresh break prior. Was that a tough decision to wrestle with, or was it a no-brainer?
The reason I even work in JavaScript in the first place is because it's the default programming language in a very real sense.
Right.
And this is where the vast number of programmers are. And, I'm not making Deno for a small subset of enthusiasts. This is software meant to be used by millions of developers, just like Node.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to push JavaScript forward. We're trying to introduce TypeScript. We're trying to get people to use ECMAScript modules. We're trying to get people to use async await instead of callbacks. There's all these pressures that we're introducing to kind of push people forward. But at the end of the day, this is software for people and needs to solve their problems. And I think we found a good way to do this with this kind of portal where we're not really compromising on our principles here. We're just introducing kind of a way to reach into the NPM ecosystem. And yeah.
So is the portal conceptual or is it also literal or technical? Like, is there a proxy involved here, or is it just like conceptually you're doing this? Tell us more about the implementation.
There is a common JS implementation inside of Deno. There is Node built-in modules inside of Deno, and there's an NPM client inside of Deno. So all of this stuff is essentially written in Rust to a large extent. And yeah, we can automatically download the NPM packages. So yes, it's technical. It is not metaphorical.
Okay.
There's a literal portal there.
Cool. On the announcement post about this NPM support, you mentioned that it's easier and safer with Deno. I thought we could use those as a couple of talking points. Let's focus in on easier first. You mentioned there's no like NPM install. It's a simpler thing. Can you maybe reiterate exactly how it works? There's no package.json, for example. There's a lot of stuff that you don't have to have, which we're kind of used to having with NPM.
So one of the things that we're trying to achieve with Deno is that it can scale up to big projects. You can have TypeScript out of the box. We're very concerned with kind of the dev experience of it. Mm-hmm. But Deno should also scale down to really small programs, in particular single file programs. And in npm/node, this is not really possible because you always need a package JSON. As minimal as your package is, you are required to have 2 files.
Right.
What we do with this npm feature in Deno is you do import npm:/express at 5, say, if you want version 5 of Express. What happens internally is the built-in NPM client will go out and download Express and all of its dependencies from the NPM registry. It does this not into a local node modules folder, but into a global node modules folder that's hidden in some cache directory. And, obviously only does this on the first request. Subsequent requests don't need to go download that. The security mechanisms in Deno, so, as a reminder, Node kind of unconditionally allows access to the file system and network. In Deno, because JavaScript is a secure sandbox, we wanted to give users the ability to conditionally not allow access to the file system, not allow access to the network, not allow access to environment variables. And that's the same, when you're importing an NPM package, that still remains, right? It's not that NPM, your Express now has unfettered access to open internet connections. In Deno, the -- allow net flag still applies there. And so this mitigates the problem that we've seen in the NPM ecosystem, these attacks where people upload malicious packages or somehow compromise a popular package and insert some nefarious code in there. We're still going to download that nefarious code. We're still going to run that nefarious code. But depending on what access you give it, for example, if you're only accessing a certain server on the internet, maybe you do -- allow net equals Datadog, right? .com.
Right.
Then any other access to, nefariouswebsite.com is going to be blocked. And so similarly for kind of file system access and environment variable access, right? You don't want a random NPM package to suddenly have access to your, say, AWS keys that are stored in environment variables that really have nothing to do with that code path.
Right. So does that operate? I know that Deno operates a lot at the runtime level or the program level, like -- allow net or allow read or allow write is like when you execute the program. When it comes to these NPM modules, is that the same level of granularity that you're specifying the allowance, or is it on the like package by package basis?
Yeah, we can't do it on the package by package basis. That is a area of research that has been going on for many years now.
Yeah.
And potentially will be possible in the future using things like shadow realms. But as it currently is, JavaScript, even with ECMAScript modules, is such a dynamic programming language that monkey patching is always possible in some form or another. And we don't think it's possible with the current setup we would love to do this. We would love to say, Express only has access to this stuff. But yeah, with the kind of JavaScript of 2022, that is not possible. But, maybe in the future. So yeah, the conditional access, the permissions system is kind of process-wide.
Right. Which is better than nothing for now. But I think we do want to reach that point. Hopefully Shadow Realms or some sort of technology gets us there, because I think as a Deno program scales, at a certain point, some aspect of your application is likely to allow certain things, like allow write, for instance, to write into the file system. Maybe you're logging, maybe you're doing configuration, and there's lots of reasons to write to the file system, obviously. And then you pull in this new package, and it's requesting write. I think in the example in your blog, you use this malware that you're installing because you don't know it's malware, and it wants to write to user bin. And of course, it's trying to install some sort of executable thing there. And what's cool about the way you all have done this is that Deno will stop and say, hey, this thing wants to write to user bin. Do you want to let it? Well, if you're already using -- allow write on your program, I think it's just going to work, right? It's not going to prompt you for that.
That's right. But you can also allow access to a subtree. So ideally, and this has been kind of a debate that we're thinking about doing, that maybe -- allow write should only allow access to the current directory and its subtree of stuff rather than the entire file system as kind of a more restricted default. But yeah.
Yeah. So that would be totally cool. I mean, that likens to your specific domains on the allow networking stuff, right? Like allow networking to these domains. Then if something comes along and tries to write to some unknown domain, send some data off to there, it's going to stop it. But yeah, like why would I ever want to write to user bin inside of my web app? Like that should be a red flag immediately. So
yeah, to be clear, you can do -- allow write equals dot. That currently will allow access only to your kind of current subtree, which should do that. And what we're thinking is you shouldn't need that equals dot part of that flag. You should just need allow write.
Right. Yeah, I think that would be a step in the right direction. So let's talk about compatibility. You said 80%, maybe 90%. Is there a way, let's say I have an app that I'm thinking, well, it's pretty close to being Deno compatible. Maybe I can take it the extra mile and get it over to there. I have a few modules. Is there a way I can like quickly check, like, is this Deno compatible or not?
just pull it in. If it's published on NPM, I would just open up a script and import it. You have to prefix it with NPM : but import it and test it out. It's kind of difficult due to the dynamic nature of JavaScript to kind of automatically go through the registry and test each module to see if they're working or not. I mean, we can test if they can import stuff, but what you really want to do is kind of run the unit tests and see if they're passing. And unfortunately, just due to the very vast number of ways that can be done in JavaScript, it's not really possible for us to kind of do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would import it and start playing around. And I think unless you're doing something real crazy in your module or like very old school, you should probably see this working out of the box.
What kind of stuff fits into the category of real crazy or old school, like very old Node syntax, or what's crazy, like CPU heavy or anything that's like architecture dependent?
Like accessing __proto __. For security reasons, we don't allow kind of prototype chain hacking stuff. Like, this is just not a good idea. And so we explicitly disallow that. But there are packages out there that rely on this behavior. And unfortunately, packages that depend on packages that rely on that behavior, even if they themselves don't depend on it. And so don't use __proto __. So stuff like that, things that you really shouldn't be doing anyway, and you really don't want your dependencies to be doing. People will shout and scream. This is always kind of the trade-off to be had with kind of backwards compatibility is like, people just want their stuff to work. They don't care.
Right.
And on the other hand, like people who know JavaScript are like, yeah, but like we're really trying to push people forward here. And, it's just kind of what do you do in that situation? Obviously, we want it as usable as possible for people, but move to modern JavaScript and don't do those sort of things. Like, you'll thank us later.
What's up, friends? This episode is brought to you by SourceGraph. With the release of SourceGraph 4.0 and the Starship event just a few weeks behind us, it is super clear that SourceGraph is becoming not just code search, but a full-on code intelligence platform. And I'm here with Joel Kortler, product manager of Code Insights for SourceGraph. Joel, this move from code search to code intelligence is a really big deal. How would you explain this feature, Code Insights, if you were just talking to folks in the hallway track of your favorite conference?
I would really start with the technical, because before I was product manager, I used to be an engineer as well. And it's really cool and exciting just to be able to say, we're going to turn your code base into a database. And the structured language that you need to interact is just the ability to write a code search. Literal search, that's totally fine. Regular expression, that'll give you a few more advanced options, even a structural search. But the number of long tail possibilities it unlocks, truly the journey of building this product was just saying, well, we've just unlocked, an infinite number of possibilities. We got to figure out some immediate use cases so we can start to, invest in this product, build it and sell it. But we're only getting started in terms of the number of uses that we're uncovering for it. The story I told you about discovering like version tracking turned out to be a really important use case that wasn't even on our roadmap 6 months prior to discovering that, as we were already planning to launch this product, until we talked to enough folks, realized this was a problem, and then found, that's like a simple regular expression capture group that you can just plug right in, because we really built this system to not limit the power of what we built. We don't want to give you like 3 out of the box templates and you can only change like 1 character or something. It's truly like the templates are there to hold your hand and get you started, but if you can come up with anything you want to track in your code base, you can do that with Code Insights.
I love it. Thank you, Joel. So right now there is a treasure trove of insights just waiting for you. Living inside your code base. Your code base is now a queryable database thanks to SourceGraph. This opens up a world of possibilities for your code and the intelligence you can gain from it. A good next step is to go to about.sourcegraph.com/code-insights. The link will be in the show notes. See how the teams are using this awesome feature. Again, about.sourcegraph.com/code-insights. Again, this link is in the show notes.
So last May, you dusted off your personal blog, which you hadn't written on in many years, to write a post about JavaScript containers. Can you tell us what the concept is here, why it's so exciting to you, enough so to pen a blog about it?
Yeah, mostly because I don't have a Twitter. I need some outlet.
You need an outlet
to write somewhere, and very, very occasionally I'll dash off something at tinyclouds.org. Yeah, JavaScript container. So we're building this serverless system called Deno Deploy, and we're doing this as a business. This uses the same technology that we're building Deno on. The concept with Deno Deploy is that you are not, most cloud providers, you're basically writing Linux programs. You're writing a Linux server. Maybe it's in Python, maybe it's in Go, maybe it's in JavaScript with Node, maybe it's in Deno. But like at the end of the day, you're packaging it up in a Docker container, shipping it off to DigitalOcean, to Fly.io. Maybe you're using AWS Lambda, but like the abstraction layer that you're working at is ultimately a Linux abstraction. And maybe you make that as thin as possible. Maybe you make that Alpine Linux.
Right.
But ultimately, you kind of have this Unix system that you're working within. And that starts becoming a little weird after some time because you realize that like almost everything that your application is doing is in JavaScript. Like essentially a lot of these API servers are like taking incoming requests, maybe doing some authentication, making an outbound connection to a database, maybe calling out to some other APIs, kind of gluing together the responses somehow, sending that back to the user. And the Unix part of it is shrinking and shrinking, and the kind of business logic JavaScript part of it is growing and growing. Mm-hmm. And at some point you realize, like, what's the Linux part of this actually doing for us? Isn't this just an unnecessary complication? And I think in particular for us JavaScript users who are used to opening Chrome DevTools, having this little shell in there where you can type JavaScript is pretty similar to kind of your terminal where you can type shell script.
Right. And
shell script is kind of similar to JavaScript in a way. And you start thinking in Chrome DevTools, it's not Unix in there. There's no real directory tree. There's no environment variables. There's no systemd. There's none of this Unix stuff. You're just in this like browser world, and it doesn't matter what operating system ultimately is kind of underneath it. You're abstracted into this nice scripty kind of JavaScript world. And what we're trying to do with Deno Deploy is really raise the abstraction layer for a cloud service. And so instead of providing kind of JavaScript inside of a Unix container, we're just providing the JavaScript. And so you can start thinking of servers written in JavaScript as being their own kind of container, rather than packaging this up with Node inside of a Docker container. As long as you're comfortable being explicitly JavaScript, you can kind of just live in this browser world view. And this has a lot of nice benefits, right? Your JavaScript server package, if you use Deno, is very small, right? On the order of kilobytes, right? Where essentially just zip up your JavaScript source code. And, this is quite small. So our deployments happen in, 5 seconds or so. The cold start time for this, because we're not kind of booting up a Linux instance and starting up other stuff, there's just less involved. Really what we're doing is in Deno Deploy, we're starting a new tab in the sky, essentially, to service requests.
Ooh, I like that metaphor. That makes sense.
If you think of your Chrome browser and all the tabs that you've got open, it's very similar to what we're doing as a serverless hosting service. So you've got your bank open in one tab, you've got your work email open in another tab, and you've got some nefarious website open in another tab. They're all running JavaScript programs. They're all installed super quickly. I mean, think about how long it takes to install Figma. Like 1 second, right? You open the tab and it's there. And compare that to like how long it takes to install Adobe Illustrator.
Can't compare the two.
These things are made to be installed quickly. You don't even think of it as being installed, even though you are downloading all of the source code.
Yeah.
I mean, it's instantaneous. So you're really running like a multi-tenant environment, lots of multi-tenant programs. These things start up super fast. And yeah, that's essentially what we're doing, but server side. So, we have many, many tenants, many hundreds of thousands of websites that we're hosting on Deno Deploy. And when an incoming request comes in, it's very likely that we don't actually have an isolate running for that, but we can start one up in the flash of,
You just hit Command T and you're ready to go, right? You just pop a tab.
Yeah, I mean, there's no UI, obviously.
I know. I'm following your metaphor.
But like in milliseconds, we can basically spin this up and it can respond to that request. And with network latency, our cold starts are around 400 ms, 300 ms, something like that. Warm response times around 40 ms. So anyway, you get these compare this with, say, Lambda and the cold start times that you experience there. I mean, maybe that's an unfair comparison because Lambda is so egregious. But anyway, we're removing kind of complexity from the user. And from the user's perspective now, there is no Linux. There's no systemd. There's no file system. It's just JavaScript now.
It's just JavaScript. And you have all the benefits of isolation for security purposes, and there's other niceties as well. So like underneath that, in Deno's cloud that we can't see, or I know there's other teams working on similar things. It seems like Vercel's doing similar, Cloudflare perhaps. Maybe you can speak to some of the other people that are in your world trying to provide these things.
I mean, Vercel's reselling Cloudflare workers. There's essentially two implementations of this idea, maybe a couple of more, but there's essentially two real implementations, which would be Cloudflare workers and Deno Deploy. Things like Netlify edge functions. Netlify is actually a partner of Deno, and Deno Deploy handles the edge functions for Netlify in a similar way to how Vercel uses Cloudflare workers. Or, for example, Supabase edge functions is actually Deno Deploy under the hood.
Okay. Interesting. So is Deno Deploy then, are you a layer one? Do you consider yourself layer one? Do you have your own infrastructure, or are you built on top of somebody else's?
We're built on top of public cloud infrastructure. So we run out of all GCP and all AWS regions.
Okay.
I would say this is essentially an implementation detail on our side. At some point, I think it might make sense to go to a lower level provider like Equinix. But essentially, that's a cost question on our side to optimize costs. I think it doesn't ultimately change the user's behavior. So, I'd consider that kind of a business decision. And generally, that question should be abstracted away from people. We give you an IP address. It's kind of anycast routed to the nearest data center. And you should generally be near to a Deno Deploy instance anywhere in the world.
Do you think it's potentially also a speed move? Obviously it's a cost move. So if you're competing with Cloudflare workers, they have an advantage with their infrastructure, but could it also be faster cold starts? Couldn't you get better performance if you were running your own?
From a compute perspective, I don't think that's where the optimization. I think we can improve cold start times, but I don't think we're losing anything by using EC2, for example.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about cold start times, because obviously the lower you can get, the better. I think you said 40 milliseconds is warm, and that would be spectacular. What are your personal goals for Deno Deploy? Maybe give it 5 years. What do you think you're going to get down to? Is 400 milliseconds? It's better than some things, but obviously we'd love to have it a lot faster.
Our measurements include network latency. So this is the time, it's important to say what we're measuring here. So this is, you are a user, you are calling out to our system and coming back, and that is a cold request. How long does that take? We can do this under 200 ms in some regions like US East. And in some regions, we are less good. And hopefully we'll have this fixed soon. But in Africa, we tend to have some latency problems. I would hope that over the next couple of years that we get this down to 100 ms kind of worldwide. 200 ms maybe, I think.
Okay.
Basically, not human noticeable is kind of what what you want it to be, right? You don't.
Yeah, totally.
You should not have that kind of flicker of pause as it's starting up. And certainly,
you don't want to sit there long enough to think about
certainly under a second is absolutely necessary.
Yeah. So Cloudflare is working on similar things. Deno, there's also this working group, the WinterCG?
WinterCG.
Yeah. So This in my head, these are all in the same basket of things, but I'm not really sure exactly what WinterCG is besides it's like a working group for cloudy things. And can you tell us about it and help clear up for me?
Yeah, it's a community group. It's not an official standards organization, but it kind of operates like that. It's a collaboration largely between Deno and Cloudflare because we're kind of the two ones building systems like this. And the question is it's pretty well specified what JavaScript on the browser does. There's, many specifications about how this works and what those APIs look like. But very clearly, we are wanting to use JavaScript outside of the web browser as well. And that always is a big open question. What does it mean to make an outbound TLS connection, right? What does it mean to accept a new incoming request? Like, what's the web server API? And I've invented APIs in Node to do this. I've invented APIs in Deno to do this. Cloudflare's invented APIs in Cloudflare workers to do this. It would be nice if we could just agree on kind of what the rough idea of what a JavaScript server API might look like. And it's difficult, but I think that group is taking steps in that direction to clarify how server-side JavaScript should operate.
The cool thing about this, if it all works out, is that you have now this baseline that people can shoot for if maybe they're building a new runtime. It's interesting. There's like this new renaissance of JavaScript and TypeScript runtimes, and curious what your thoughts are on Jerod Sumner's Bun project that's been out there for probably 9 months or a year now. Is that interesting to you? Have you poked at the code and seen what he was up to, and like, do you take inspiration? What do you feel about alternate runtime, specifically Bun?
I mean, shows that server-side JavaScript is alive and well, and Node is not going to be the last, the end of the story here. I think the focus on performance is interesting. I have some qualms with kind of how these benchmark numbers are presented. Very cherry-picked, I would double-check your numbers. Mm-hmm. But I think it's good to have people thinking about this stuff.
Fair enough. Yeah, it's just interesting, the benchmark thing, because it's kind of like, this is where software engineers, the heads hit against each other, is like when it comes time to like, who's is fastest on what strata, what are you paying attention to, what are you optimizing for? Are the results legit? Are they cherry picked? Is it real world? Is it synthetic? And we tend to get mired down in the mud.
To be clear, our goal is to have Deno be the fastest JavaScript runtime, and there is no world in which Deno will be like 2x slower or 0.5x slower. Like, the claim that Rust and V8 are subpar technologies is very questionable. V8 is very, very fast, and Rust you can get any machine code you want out of Rust. So Deno will be the very, very fast. So if that is the only claim there, then I don't know. I would just check numbers is all I would say. Fair
enough. Well, I love the spirit of competition. Like, somebody comes out and says this thing is fast or faster, and it's like, well, we can talk about the facts of that, but I like the spirit of competition where you say, well, Deno's going to be either fastest or really, really fast, and so you are committed to that. And I think that's spectacular because at the end of the day, end users win, right? Like, the world wins when everyone's motivated to improve on these critical factors. Like, if you can get Deno Deploy cold starts from 400 milliseconds down to 200 milliseconds or 100 over the next 3 to 5 years, like, people benefit from that improvement. And so competition is good.
Yeah, for sure. Show me a benchmark where Deno is slow, we will fix it. And there is no world in which we focus on web servers and JavaScript runtimes, and to think that like just like a little bit of cherry-picked examples should be taken with a grain of salt.
Wise words, I think, with any benchmark is take them with a grain of salt, do your own homework, and we need people out there running them in different contexts, et cetera, in order to get a more broad picture of what is truth with regard to such things.
Yeah. I guess I'd also say that these things are pretty complex systems, right? Node and Deno, and they take many years to develop. I mean, they're not as complicated as Chrome itself. I'd say even an order of magnitude less complex, but These are very, very large software projects with lots of stuff. And it's one thing to put out a demo, and it's another thing to ship production software. There's a lot of people playing around with JavaScript runtimes. Just.js, for example, is a JavaScript runtime that does really great in the Tech Empower benchmarks and should be known more. Andrew, who creates Just.js, is fantastic, great at optimizing web servers. But I mean, it's just look at the source code. It's very much a demo. And there's kind of a difference between a demo and something that is actually has
production grade,
many tens of thousands weekly users that are using this for kind of production workloads. So
right. That makes me think about Deno's capabilities. Would you say there's any type of application or capability that Deno allows for? So like if you pick up Deno, you can do this new thing as an app developer that you couldn't do with Node or that you couldn't do with other server-side tech in general. Like, is there anything that it unlocks for you that's unique?
You can do almost anything with Node if you set your heart to it, right? It's a general purpose system. I think, removing complexity from that system and getting people to their solution faster is really what we're aiming at, and doing this in a more secure way. And at the end of the day, giving them more performance for their program. But it's not like there's something that you could do in Deno that you couldn't do before. I think with Deno Deploy, that's where we are aiming to really unlock new behavior, to be able to write, a 50-line file that defines, say, some WebSocket server and deploy that in a second and kind of have that run indefinitely as kind of a persistent WebSocket server out there. I think that is pretty cutting edge sort of stuff. Deno is, from the developer experience, gets you to your solution faster. I think that's the newness.
What's up, party people? This episode is brought to you by our new friends at Lolo Code. Lolo Code lets you build cloud agnostic serverless apps that make it too easy to go from 0 to 1. If you're familiar with building serverless apps, you can think of Lolo Code as your backend with a visual editor to let you think and build at the same time. No servers to worry about. This is serverless. And I'm here with Gabor Naj, software engineer at Lolo Code. Tell me, Gabor, what gets you excited about Lolo Code for developers?
So Lolo Code is sort of all about the mentality of reducing the threshold and the pain of getting something from having an idea to actually having something in production. I think that a lot of developers that I know and that are out there know the sort of frustration of having an idea and wanting to prototype it, and it being a pretty difficult process of actually getting from, okay, I have an idea, and actually having a stack, having code, having it deployed into a cloud or whatever. It takes quite a bit of work, and Lolo really focuses on minimizing the effort required for that process to actually take place. It's a low-code environment built for developers, so that actually means that you get to visualize the different nodes and the data flows between them in your application, which kind of makes the whole process of prototyping and the whole process of sketching out the architecture and getting a better understanding of what it is that you're actually building and how the whole thing functions much easier to understand while you're actually developing the application. So instead of having to spend hours with a whiteboard first, you can actually sit down and start sketching out your application by creating these nodes and creating these links between them while you're actually already doing the development work.
Very cool. Thank you, Gabor. So Lolo Code is built for developers. Try it free today. No credit card required. Check them out at lolo.co/JSParty. Again, lolo.co/JSParty.
So where does WebAssembly fit into this mix? We've been talking JavaScript containers. We've been talking about running things on the edge and in the cloud. And I know WebAssembly plays into this, but I'm always cloudy on exactly where and how. Can you help understand if there's a story here that involves WebAssembly?
Yeah, so we were making this analogy of like the Chrome DevTools console and the Bash terminal shell that you have. And we're saying like, kind of Bash and JavaScript are kind of similar. And like in some ways, like the web world view, JavaScript is kind of the new Bash. So the question is like, okay, so you're in your terminal and now you call out to ImageMagick to convert a JPEG to a PNG, right? You do convert image.png, image.jpg or whatever.
Right.
That ImageMagick program is written probably in C and is compiled into some machine code and packaged up in some ELF executable. You're calling into this native code from there. The analogy of that in kind of the web world view is Wasm. So you're kind of scripting around with JavaScript. You're in your JavaScript shell, and then you can call into Wasm to execute some, quote unquote native code, but native code in a platform independent, secure, webby sort of way. And so the analogy is kind of JavaScript is to Bash as Wasm is to ELF or machine code, or as it is to executable programs.
Okay. So when it comes time for a cloud platform like Deno Deploy, then do those things coexist? Like from your Deno apps, you can call into Wasm apps and stuff like that?
Yeah. JavaScript is the substrate that everything lives in. So, you accept your request in JavaScript, but then you need to process an image or otherwise call into, say, some Rust code, you would call into Wasm, just as you would in a browser context.
Gotcha. So do you see Deno Deploy more as an end user or indie programmer product, or do you see it more as like a middle layer between me and Supabase, for example, where you're actually empowering them to do stuff that they couldn't do? Who do you see your customer as? Is it both? Is it one in particular? Because it seems like the big money might be with the bigger providers, but then also the long tail is indie.
I mean, edge compute is kind of an interesting trajectory, right? It's kind of started with, if you're very old, like me, started with like Apache configuration files, like these XML configuration files where you could like do kind of redirect rules and kind of path rewriting and stuff in this XML file. And then like the next generation of that is like Nginx, where you have maybe even some Lua scripting abilities to do like a bit more logic, some more complicated path rewriting rules. We're kind of pushing this further to where now you can actually do this not in Lua, which is a terrible programming language, one indexed, ridiculous. But now in kind of the default programming language, the lingua franca of programming languages, JavaScript,
right,
and kind of script these things in JavaScript. But people are still more or less using it for kind of these same sort of utilities where like, okay, I can do some redirect rules. Maybe I can block some IP addresses. Maybe I can set a cookie based on geolocation sort of stuff. But there's this worldview that is like, actually, now that we can run JavaScript and, in Deno Deploy, you can run TypeScript, you can import modules. You can't use NPM modules yet, but soon you'll be able to import NPM modules. And so now it's becoming not just you can script around JavaScript a bit, but actually you can do pretty complicated things. You can make outbound requests. You can pull in full frameworks. You can actually pull in React and run React at the edge and do SSR to like return static HTML, kind of using React as kind of a modern day PHP where you're kind of server side rendering stuff. And you start getting into the situation where it's like, actually, it's not something that passes through to a backend server. Like I've got my kind of edge rewriting rules that kind of operate quickly, and this is with my cache. And then my application server is this big, slow Ruby on Rails thing that like ultimately things pass back into. But like, what if we actually write for the edge, write our application server at the edge and just move more and more of the logic out there? Is that possible? Are we kind of facing a next generation of application servers that actually are running not just in one location, but like everywhere all at once in a serverless fashion in a single JavaScript file? Like, can you just define a 50-line file that like runs everywhere kind of basically for free because it's so cheap to roll these things out? I think that's where we're going. I think there's some open questions there around kind of state management and data stores, because obviously if you're running at the edge and you have kind of a single Postgres instance in US East that you're connecting to, you kind of lose all the benefits ultimately of running at the edge. So you need some sort of geo-replicated data store. But it's not completely worked out now, and Deno Deploy certainly doesn't have any state features right now. But this is the direction that I think web development is going.
Right.
Say in the next couple of years, we're going to see many more like full applications running at the edge.
Yeah. You're so right with the state management being really the sticking point. There's a lot of money going into this problem right now, right? Like there's a lot of people toiling at the moment about geo-replicated databases that you don't have to think about as much as we used to have to.
There's some really good off-the-shelf solutions right now. CockroachDB is great. Spanner is great. Depending on DynamoDB is great. It kind of depends on your use case and what exactly you need. But CockroachDB has serverless setups now, and you can certainly connect your Deno Deploy to a serverless CockroachDB. I think from kind of a product perspective, it's like, how can you make that even smoother so that you don't have to think about two different products at once?
Yeah, because you all are trying to be batteries included, right? Like that's one of your big things.
Trying to make it as easy as possible to build the software that most developers are targeting.
Right. So back in July, we had your colleague, Luca Casanato, on the show talking about Fresh. And so this is another one of your, I guess, aspects of your batteries included is like, well, what if we had a first party actually supported bleeding edge web framework alongside all these other things? Like that's a battery that you want to have included. And on that show, Luca kind of teased a little bit at the possibility that y'all are working on your own actual storage solution. He wouldn't say much else. That's all he would say at the time. Do you have any comments on that?
We're thinking about it. No comments right now. I consider this kind of a R&D effort on our side. We want to do something that is, if you know the software that we create, is as smooth like the rest of our software and doesn't, should be kind of shockingly simple. So we're playing around with this and we think we have some good ideas in this area, but it's too early still to talk about.
Fair enough. I'll just keep asking every time I have a Deno person on the show.
Sure, yeah.
Until someone's ready to talk about it. Because it's for me, like that's the panacea is like when you can tie together all those things with my data persistence and I don't have to cobble together and I can have my 50-line JavaScript file and I can write that in an afternoon and I can ship it around the world to all these different points of presence and it can execute like milliseconds away from the users and it can store the data right there and somehow have all that thing work together without me writing that code, which I'm not good enough to write. Like how cool is that going to be?
Yeah, absolutely. That is the dream. We want to get there too. Very
cool. So it's hard to believe, Ryan, but you've been working on this project for a long time now. Was it 2017, 2018 maybe?
Yeah.
So let's call it 4 or 5 years roughly.
Sure. And before that Node, I've been working on server-side JavaScript now for a good decade plus now.
Yes. So I'm just curious, with Deno specifically, do you feel like you're still in the early innings? Do you feel like you've established the project? Where do you feel like it is in your desires for what you're trying to accomplish?
Building a programming platform is you're asking users to program against your platform. And so this just requires you to be very persistent and fix a lot of bugs and be reliable and make releases and just keep at this. And we kind of measure our success with how many people are using Deno every week. And this number is growing. We just passed the 100,000 per week mark here. And I think it's going very well. I think a lot of users are working on code bases and, using systems that are kind of deeply embedded in Node and might feel that couldn't use Deno for their project immediately, but people should take another look at every once in a while because things are changing quite rapidly. And I would imagine that people will be able to, if you've done that in the past and looked at Deno and thought, maybe not right now, it might be different next time. So we're kind of full steam ahead on this project. We make a release every month on a minor release.
How many years do you think you got left in you personally?
I find it fun. So, I love this stuff. I think especially kind of seeing how I have this old blog post this old rant about software and just dealing with all the complexities of it. And now having worked with professionally as a software engineer for, 15 years now, it's just clear that things are getting simpler, and it's just so easy for people to get started now. And there's just such great software available compared to just the absolute nightmare that it used to be. And like being able to simplify parts of the system like that and giving people that experience of like, oh man, like this is really solving my problem is pretty exciting to me. We are not at the end state of web development. That is for sure. Server stuff. Like
right.
Every indication is that this is only heating up. So yeah, I find this very fun.
I can tell. You get fiery thinking about it and talking about it. I really appreciate your insights today. So Deno 1.28 is out there. Maybe there's even a 29 by now. I don't know. That was mid-November. But either way, we have NPM support. It's stable. It's almost comprehensive. Definitely worth a relook. If you haven't looked at Deno because of that reason, there's no better time to check it out than right now. Anything coming down the pipeline that's like, closer than the persistence layer that you don't want to talk about? Anything that's like in the next 3 months, 6 months that people can look forward to that y'all will be shipping, or any events upcoming for Deno?
So expanded NPM support is coming out. So, our big focus was on stabilizing this and making sure that people could use this, but it's still not available in the REPL, for example. That will be landing here in a day or so. No, next week. It's still not available in Deno Compile. That Deno Compile is the ability to output kind of a self-contained binary that contains all of your packaged JavaScript code. So we'll be working on that over the next couple of weeks here. And then, of course, NPM support in Deno Deploy so that you can, really kind of pull in these packages. And we want to do this in a way that deployments are very fast. The problem with NPM packages is that they're very large, and when you start pulling in dependencies, like it's even larger. And so we're trying to find a good solution to making Deno Deploy able to use NPM dependencies, but not exploding the size of the deployment.
Sounds good. Well, listener, all of the links to all the things discussed on this episode is in your show notes. That is JS Party for today. Ryan, thanks so much for joining us, sitting down and candidly sharing all the things that you're up to. It's pretty cool stuff.
Thanks, Jerod.
All right, that's it for today. We'll talk to y'all on the next one. But that next one won't drop until the New Year's ball drops. We like to take 2 weeks off at the end of the year to relax, rejuvenate, and reboot our brains for what's next. Thanks once again to our partners at Fastly and Fly for supporting our work on JS Party. And thanks, of course, to our mysterious friend, Breakmaster Cylinder, for the dope beats. We love your work, BMC. Lastly, I'd like to thank all of our JS Party panelists for making this podcast so awesome in 2022. Shout outs to Nick Nisi, Amel Hussein, K-Ball, Divya, Faraz, Amelia Wattenberger, Ali Spittle, and Chris Hiller. JS Party is good because y'all are great at what you do. Seriously, thanks. All right, that's it. This one's done. Have a great end of the year, and we'll catch you on the other side.
Catch you guys on the flippity flip. See you guys.
I saw a chat GPT joke in there for a minute and then it's gone. Somebody deleted it. It'd be a crying shame because it was pretty funny. By the way, if you're currently obsessed with chat GPT, don't worry. We do have an episode of the changelog. Oh, it's back. Sorry, Ryan. I'm just talking to the chat now. So Igor in our chat said, go to NPM, scrape all the package names and port them to Deno, please. And ChatGPT said, I'm sorry, but I'm not able to browse the internet or perform tasks like scraping data from websites. Sorry.
Yeah, I have to wait for ChatGPT 4.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sorry, but I'm not allowed to do that. That War Games? Which was that word? I'm sorry, but I can't do that. Michael? David?
No, that was not War Games. That's HAL 2000. That's
right. That's HAL.
Space Odyssey.
Do you read me, Hal?
Affirmative, Dave. I read you.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
What's the problem?
I think you know what the problem is just as well as I do.
What are you talking about, Hal?
This mission is too important for me to allow you to jeopardize it.
I don't know what you're talking about, Hal.
I know that you and Frank were planning to disconnect me, and I'm afraid that's something I cannot allow to happen.